Ba-da! Good evening. Welcome to the Adults and Friendships Finding, Keeping, and Cutting the Rest Loose. Feels a bit aggressive here this evening, but I'm so glad you're here. My name is Dr. Jody Carrington. I'm a clinical psychologist, and once a month we do a clinical workshop around some sort of mental health topic. And this month is all about developing friendships. And we talk about this all the time for kids and relationships and all those things, but we rarely talk about it. There's rarely a script for how you make and keep and call friendships in adulthood. So we thought, why don't we dive into some of that tonight? So that's what we're going to do. And just a quick run through if this is one of your first with us. There's a chat that you will see if you're watching this live. If this is the recorded one, you can interact with us if you're watching this on the rewatch. But if you're here live with us, thank you for being here. We can see everything that you say to us. If you would like your comments to be anonymous, just change your name just to your initials or whatever, and that goes on the side so you can keep confidentiality if that's important to you. And Marty and Des are both monitoring the chat. And so at the end of the talk, then we'll jump into some of your questions. And I can also see them coming through as we're chatting and diving into things tonight. Okay. That's the first thing. And I love it when you tell us where you're joining in from. So we got everybody coast to coast that we can see already tonight. Lots in Alberta. We got our Nova Scotians that are staying up late and our BCers that are just having their snacks while they're watching us. Houston, Texas. Hello, Liz. What? We're so grateful you're here. And I will tell you this tonight, although I am in London, Ontario tonight, I always start the podcast, these things, any talk that I give by reminding everybody that everything I create for you happens back on Treaty 7 land, which is now known as the center part of the province of Alberta. It was home to the Blackfoot Confederacy first. That is made up of the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, the Stoney Nakoda First Nation, and the Métis Nation Region 3. And the acknowledgement of the land on which I get to do this holy work is always so critically important, and probably the fundamental thing about what we're going to talk about tonight. The importance of developing and continuing to deepen relationships as we grow into our later years. And the superpower that we all have is always around acknowledgement. So we'll kick it off like that. The other thing that I like to give is just a disclaimer. This is not therapy. Instead, this is just intended to provide resources and information about things that I think are really important, because mental health resources tend to be really difficult to come by. And so we want to create a safe place to have those conversations around here. And so any of the conversations that we have or the questions that we ask will be, of course, we don't know your situations in depth, but certainly, just some conversations around what it means to really develop important, meaningful relationships always come back to the thing I know to be true, which is where we're going to start tonight. So Marty and I currently are in London, Ontario, and remarkably, we just went out for dinner with one of our friends who, Brenda, who we met through doing this work, and she's been in our corner forever. And we started to have some conversations even tonight about what it means to develop friendships as you get older. I've been watching a lot of Simon Sinek's work lately around why friendships are important, why they've never been so difficult to, I think, keep and establish and adhere. So I'll start by saying this. The definition of adult friendships is quite interesting to me, because I was like, there's something critical to this piece. I'm 49, and in the next year, I will turn 50 in June. Who's counting? And I am thinking more and more these days about longevity, and not just necessarily meeting a number, but growing old in a way. So one of my dearest friends on the planet, it's been 5 years since she's been gone, left this planet at 44. And I often think about sort of this gift of growing old. Older doesn't have anything to do with a number. It really has so much to do with the quality of your life and the people who are in it. So oftentimes it's like, okay, so I put a resource in the back of the resource section, a book called Outlive. Peter Attia wrote this or re-updated it in 2023. It was recommended to me by my physician because I'm having lots of conversations in my own life about, okay, so you can work hard, achieve your goals, be a badass motherfucker, kicker, asser. Oh yeah, also PS I might swear. So if you have little ears in your world, we love the children here, but generally the content you just want to be aware. So if you want your little pop your little headphones in or something, it might be safe for everybody in the world. So I'm thinking more about longevity and what that means and what it means to sort of be healthy in your body. Never before, even as a 49-year-old woman, have I thought about creating a body that it's always been about let's be successful, I'll be honest with you, so for me in this very privileged space, okay, white, straight, able-bodied, I've had financial resources. I've never worried about whether I had somebody in my world to love me. Okay, so essentially what that means is I start on third base. I would say, the greatest struggle, again, which is a privilege, is female friendships for me. How do you decide who's in your world? How do I think a lot about spending much of my adolescence, certainly my 20s, wondering where I fit. Am I too big? Am I too loud? Am I too quiet? Am I popular enough? What is this about? Why didn't they invite me? What happened here? And I think so much about the wasted time that comes in that space. And at the same time, relationships become such a critical piece in our life. And as I'm aging, I'm also thinking about, okay, so for the first time in my life, the physical health, what does that look like in terms of, am I running because I want to get skinny, or am I running because what is happening in my, what does my blood work look like? What's happening to my A1C? What is happening to all these things that now you got to start looking at, which again, the key to longevity is about prevention. The key to longevity isn't about what do we do when we get the cancer? What do we do when this happens? How do we respond to things? And I think there is a huge paucity of a conversation around, lack of conversation around the key role that relationships play, who your friendships are in your life. Because typically speaking, your partner or partners, however you choose to live your intimate relationships, are not good enough. They cannot be everything, nor should they. We're not good enough to be the confidant, the co-parent, the financial advisor, the business partner, all of those things that happens when you get into a long-term relationship with somebody. And historically, there was a need to create community far more than there is today for the sole purpose of survival. Okay, so we needed the villages in which we lived to raise our children, to be able to navigate. And we had to go to the store more often to buy our bread. We needed to, in schoolhouses, they were smaller. Just one generation ago, you made eye contact with everybody. You knew everything about everybody. And I remember this, growing up in a small town, that was such a detriment at the time, growing up in a small town, right? Because everybody knew everything about everybody else. It is the greatest predictor of longevity. So why I think this became such an important topic tonight is simply for that reason. Who you surround yourself with is far more predictive of your quality of life than whether you drink, smoke, how fat you are, how much money you make or don't make. All of those don't nearly contribute as much to the quality of your longevity as does the social reciprocity that happens in your life. The engagement with the people that you are walking home with. And, if you've been around here at all, you know this to be true about the things I talk about. There's two rules to this human race. Number one, we are neurobiologically wired for connection. You disconnect from infants, they die. We will not, in our lifetime, the lifetime of our children, for any of the foreseeable future, will we see a automation of relationship. And I've said this again and again and again. The critical piece of relationship and connection is that you will not ever automate it. The new AI, the only AI that matters is authentic interaction. Full stop. Full stop. Okay. So like that's like the 007 trick. When you start to get that in your bones as whatever role you play, as a police officer, as a partner, as a CEO, as a, high powered exec, or and a mom who, has just had twins and feels like nobody knows them anymore. Like you pick a human. It does not matter to me. Right. When we understand the quality of our relationships are the greatest predictor of our well-being, we start to understand, and I think, the importance of the investment in those relationships, and really clearly being aware of who we choose to let into that space, how we define it, how we do it, right? Is it just because you've always been there? Is it just because, you were there, you were my bridesmaid? So obviously we need to be friends forever. I talk about this all the time. Two of my oldest friends on the planet, we met in kindergarten. Many people who have come into our lives, I think there's two things that we need to consider tonight, okay? Your desire for social interaction, which I think is really predictive of how many people you need in your life, or the quality of relationship. Some of us are far more social than others. And then I think we need to get very good better at deciding, particularly as women or those who identify as women, deciding who and when we call, which doesn't mean a block and bless of the whole world. Okay. Because I think that's the fucking easiness now. Well, we don't agree. Done. I don't like you anymore. You said this thing. Done. Whoa. Okay. We weren't able to do that one generation ago because we lived together, we raised our babies together, we depended on each other for survival. Now it's easy to block you. I'm not going to see you. We're not inviting you anymore. We never ever have to interact as family systems, as friendships, of whatever that looks like. Okay. So let's pack all of that into, I think, understanding significantly the idea of why friendships matter so much. So the data around this is interesting to me. I'm fascinated these days with the concept of longevity, of how do we step into this next season? We are the first generation of parents. We're the first generation of adult friendshippers who have had access to social media. We have never had this much opportunity in the world of friendships to compare at this level. First generation, we don't know what the fuck is happening. We have so much information on what these people are doing. And we're so concerned about the children, okay? The anxious generation, which I love. I love Jonathan Haidt's work. The last workshop we did, we talked a lot about John's work around anxiety in kids. And I love this. I truly think, Marty and I were talking about this today, I truly think my next book has something to do with our generation, which I would call not the anxious generation. We're the lonely generation. We're the first generation where there is so much comparison, and that we get people's highlight reels that we're not used to, and we don't get a break from the people. Huh? Our friends, our acquaintances, the ones we interact with, whether we play in the same kids hockey team, or we are we go to work with each other every day, we've never had so much access to each other. Okay, so we may have a disagreement at the hockey rink, or my kid gets on the A team, your kid gets on the B team, and there's not a chance that we get a break from that. I can fucking fire off a text, or I'm looking at somebody's social media and I'm like, oh, that bitch got this, or she, do you know? And I don't think we're taking into account what that does to our systems and our need to retreat and isolate, because we can't compete, we can't compare, or there's no way we're living up to that. Obviously they got their shit together. If you're a very good poster, if you are very good at displaying your life, it, I think, becomes a significant imitation, what is that word, Marty? Like, intimidating. It's a significantly intimidating issue, right? If you can create a good reel, you're fucking it. You're. It looks like you got your shit together, but I will tell you, I'm very connected to the greatest reel makers of the world in many of our opportunities right now, and I will tell you, everybody is a goddamn disaster behind the scenes. Everybody, all of the, and here's the cool thing about being able to do more and more work, I think, in a public setting. The Today Show was a really great, exposure to, just people are people are people. They, they are, I haven't talked about this very much, but like on that day, we got to meet the two winners of the US Open. Also trying to adjust their outfits and try to see if they look good. And, Sabalenka, can we take a picture? And yep, we can. Naomi Watts is there worrying about if her suit's straight and if her fucking glasses match and all the shit. Do you understand? Paris Hilton walks into the same kitchen when we were doing the podcast issues, right? And she's got her staff trying to wonder if the things are okay. Okay, it's the same. We all have the same worries and the same fears. And now that we've been inundated by so much information by everybody else, and we've never been this sleep deprived, we question our contribution to the friendships in our world. How much are we needed? How much do they need us? I don't want to be a burden. It looks like they're busy. I saw them on social media. I believe this to be true about them. I didn't see them on social media, so I think that, probably they want their space. So, okay, the assumptions have never been more greater in this lonely generation. Okay. I'd love to know what you think about that. So I'm watching the chat. So tell me more about that. Do you think that it's becoming harder or easier to develop friendships these days? I would really love to know that. So throw that in there while we keep going. So what does it mean? Harder. Okay. What does it mean to develop this issue of really important relationships? And I think as I'm shifting into this focus of I need good people so that the longevity in my world is something that looks connected, that is something that looks healthy. Who am I surrounding myself with that will make me a better human? And it's like, not from a selfish perspective that I'm going to keep and call all the things, but really taking stock on, this is going to be the number one key of this whole talk tonight, okay? I ask this all the time of people who are struggling with trauma. Where do you feel it? And I think this is the question all the time. When you pay attention to the people who make you feel seen, that is going to be the greatest predictor of who you need to spend more time with. Also, the reverse to that is true. Who are you doing that for? How hard are you working? Are you committed to, are you thinking about allowing the people in your world to feel seen? What stops that? Our capacity to acknowledge other humans is when we get stuck in our head. Do you see how easy it is to become internally focused because we're inundated with all this data that we're not enough, we're not skinny enough, we're not drinking a collagen, we're not doing the things. This, obviously, look at, she's posting every second day that they're fucking frolicking and skiing and they got a party and they're doing all the things trying to look really good. What if I told you that everybody on the planet, 1 in 4 right now, kids would say, actually, that's not even true. That's the suicide data. The loneliness data would say 50%. 1 in 2 would say they're not so sure that in the last 7 days anybody cares about them. This is true about adults. 64% of all adults would say in this moment, this is Canada, US data combined, that they've never felt this isolated. So if we take that number, 64% of your friends, 64% of the people in your world are really wondering if they matter, okay? And I think that it is also super easy. Oh, Deanne, to your point, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, the divisiveness that happens in what you share. Oh, you're I don't like in complete the fill in the blank here, but you're a Trump supporter. Done. You're an anti-vaxxer. We're out. You're a Oh, you're supporting this. Do you know the divisiveness that happens without the context of many things in our lives, in our friendships, in our worlds? You know, what becomes so critical is we surround ourselves with people who think differently, believe differently, come from different cultural experiences than us. That's how we grow. But do you know the algorithm that we choose to follow is designed specifically to what we believe to be true? Because we will unfollow, unsupport, not ever talk about the things that we don't believe to be true. And so when we spend the vast majority of our time scrolling, particularly at night when we're vulnerable, we are looking only at things that people believe or that we believe to be true. Okay. Because you create your own algorithm. Your algorithm and my algorithm is very different. Okay. The allure of the algorithm is it reinforces what we believe to be true. It is sucking us into the things. And I don't mean to talk about it as an external entity because we've created it, but I think it's really helpful, even, when we externalize anxiety, to really externalize the pull that has happened in our opportunities to disengage from humans and engage in the Netflix or all of those things make us feel good because we watch the things that give us hits of dopamine. And I think what's really critical about this is why, not that you have to stop social media. I want you to think about it in a completely different way. And so as I was preparing for tonight, I was thinking about some things too, right? We invest a lot of I think we normalize the ability to seek mentors and advisors and even therapists, for our marital relationship, advisors for our financial decisions. When I'm building a business, I can't tell you how many mentors I've had along the way. We meet with this fella, they come in and do a mentorship talk. I hire a mentor. I've had maybe 3 that I can identify that we've engaged financially with to be like, okay, can you help me grow my company? What is the best way to create, systems, strategies? I don't know anything about that. Teach me about this, teach me about this, teach me. Nothing do we invest in therapy around our friendships, going to therapy with our friends, having advisors or conversations really about how do you develop and be a good friend. What happens in this age of building relationships, attracting to people to us, getting in this mindset that nobody has time for me, which then really must mean that I'm not worthy as a friend. Okay, fuck you, everybody, all the things. Okay. And so that really, led me to this idea about, okay, so what is adult friendship? It's conceptualized, if we're going to get specific about what do you call the thing? Definition. It's a voluntary, reciprocal, informal, restriction-free, and usually sometimes long-lasting close friendship between 2 unique partners. Okay. That's what adult friendship is defined as. And in general, the data is really profound around this. I got to tell you, it is one of the greatest things. If you want to get better at anything, it really is. If you want your health to get better, it's really looking at who you surround yourself with. One of the greatest predictors of well-being. In general, adult friendship was found to predict or at least positively be correlated with. Define adult friendships again, please. Okay, Abby. Yes, I will. This is a dumb definition, but I'll just tell you, this is the one I could find on the interweb. A voluntary, reciprocal, okay, so this is a 2-way street, informal, okay, I don't have to be your friend because we work together. I don't have to be your friend because our kids are on our same hockey team. All of those things, it can start that way, right? But I choose then to continue that relationship. Restriction-free, and usually long-lasting close friendship between 2 unique partners. And oh, Anne, you're so amazing. It's this idea, and I even struggle with that long-lasting piece because I think that I've developed such important connections with people that are a reason, this old adage, the reason, the season, the lifetime. And I think what's really fascinating about it is researchers found that cultivating friendships can decrease the risk of heart disease and high blood pressure. So physical manifestations in your body. right? That like friendships aren't just like, how many numbers do you have? Because here's what I think happens is that early on, it's all about numbers, right? I remember this, like, in my teens and my 20s, how many you got, how many groups you have, all those things. As you grow into your 30s, it's a little bit like, oh my God, where do I fit? What's the deal? Who's having kids? Who's not having kids? That starts to really define where you spend your time, right? And so then oftentimes that changes. And I would argue sort of in your 50s is when you've just started to gather enough information to start to make some real clear choices about those things. And then your 50s and 60s are where it gets good. But what I think is interesting about that is really, it's like it changes your physical health on who you have in your life. And reduces chronic pain. Good friends can improve your confidence, encourage healthier lifestyle habits, help you cope with traumas, and overall boost your sense of belonging and happiness. In fact, and I put this in your resources as well, positive supportive relationships predict higher physical and psychological well-being levels more than any other variable. So the chances of individuals' happiness increase when they are associated with a happy person. Shocking. Misery loves miserable company. Misery does not love company. And oftentimes we tend to, depending on the state of our internal being, surround ourselves with people who we get together with over a divisive thing. Yeah? Let's all hate this thing. Oh, you don't like Trudeau? Fucking rights. Let's all fight the world here. You don't like unions? I don't know. So pause. We'll talk about that in a second. I also think that what is really interesting is when we start to talk about like how many do you need, it is not the number that matters. But I was really interested to see if there'd been any data, and there hadn't been a lot. But empirical research showed that individuals report an average of 3 close friends. And I think what is really dependent on that is, again, that idea that we talked about at the top of, how many people do you need in your life? And I would really argue that it's sort of the reflection in your own life of, am I shutting people out because I don't believe humans are good? I don't believe friendships can follow through. I don't, my understanding of human relationship, friendships, based in your own trauma, your own experience, is that people will always leave you. That can really dictate how connected you allow yourself to become. And I think that what's really true is our ability to develop adult friendships is really based on the scripts that we come to be true about adult friendships. If you have experienced or witnessed your mother, your aunts, your grandmothers, your grandfathers, your whatever, have massive falling outs in friendships, it's good to reflect on that, right? How is that affecting the way that you tell the story about friendships? And, I often talk about that, in intimate relationships, which, I just did a podcast a couple of times this season. We've really dug into this in this Unlonely season of my podcast about how our experience of relationships, our understanding of how humans will eventually treat you, really predict the way you choose to navigate your relationship. And my story, based on the marriage of my parents, based on, their engagement, watching my mom lose and engage in friendships, is really worth the reflection in your life, because it's either something to be considered, but sometimes challenged. Is that true for me? Because the core wounds that many of us sort of bring to the table is that either I'm not good enough, I will be abandoned or rejected. How much of that lives in your own body that as you age is really important to sort of take a look at, right? And so her truth, their truth, doesn't necessarily need to be yours. And I think reflecting on what that looked like, whatever that is, will obviously be integrated into how your experience has been this far, right? So we often clash those two, the data that we've been given in our bones through multiple generation and women who come before us, or men who come before us, humans who've come before us, to what we know to be true in this lifetime, right? So just what's so critical, I think, is just a reflection on that and how that might be contributing to like, oh yeah, I remember, my aunt's best friend, was the one her husband cheated on her, like whatever. Those things can become really telling. So then we get very suspicious and we're like, we don't know why. Our bodies keep the score. Okay. And I think it's really true. So I think about my mom and, the remarkable women that she's gathered along the way. And oftentimes too, the ones that like hurt her to the core. And all of us will have a lot of those stories. And it doesn't mean that it was right, wrong, whatever the deal is. There's no judgment in this space. It's just really about paying attention to, what might be a part of your unique experience in developing friendships. I remember a lot too, again, it was a different time. So all of those things matter, but like how important couple friends were to my parents. I remember growing up a lot, the weekends were playing cards at somebody's house, right? And taking the back roads home because, you were drinking till 2 o'clock in the morning or the kids were sleeping on the couch or whatever that was, right? We'd go camping always with this specific group of friends. And I was always admired how, my mom really stayed connected. My father stayed deeply connected to some of his long-term people. And also it was some of those people that broke their hearts the most. And there's this real mix for me of the importance of couple relationships that play out very differently now in my marriage, in our relationship. We are far more independent than I think my parents were, and there's a lot of people in my life that Aaron and I don't share couple friendships with, but I would spend a lot of time with in this lifetime. Tanis and Leah and I started in kindergarten together, and there's an unbreakable conversation that happens between us, and our husbands are three very different people. That's okay, right? That's very different. And there is one of Aaron's best friends who was in our wedding party. I adore his wife. And if we get a chance to go on holidays with the two of them, changes everything for us, right? So it's interesting about, does your intimate relationship have to define who you develop friendships with? What is your template about that? What does that look like, in this season of your life? I think becomes really important just to sort of reflect on, right? Okay. There's something very compelling, I think, in this space too, and I put this in your notes about the concept of belonging that I think, I could really dive into and write a whole chapter about, because I think that's the heart of the protective factors that come about in this world of friendship. When we feel like we belong to something, some group, something, where we can land when, not if, shit starts to fall apart, it becomes really critical. So I think that's part of the protective factors that come with friendships, either like, your cousins that you can always fall back into, your best friends, like the people who maybe you haven't talked to in years, but in a heartbeat, if something happens with your baby, they'll be there. And I think about, so many people in my life that are like that, right? We live in different cities, we live in different towns, we live in different cities and towns. Okay, keep up. Anyway, different countries, but a single phone call would mean I'm on a plane. And I think there's a lot of like sort of reflection and the need to sort of figure out taking stock on who those people are right now, because I think that becomes really, really critical. So this belonging. So researchers have shown that when our sense of belonging is threatened even momentarily, like all of a sudden we think we're out of this. This is very true. I'll talk about in the police world, right? Police officers, not unlike like if you were once an NHL hockey player, if you once were a university level basketball player, if you were once a cop, that identity comes with such a degree of belonging that if that's threatened, so you retire, you break your leg and you can no longer play hockey, you get traded and nobody calls you up anymore, that sense of disconnection becomes so critically important, which is, part of my conversation around in the policing world has been, what are we doing to keep police officers in particular connected in retirement? I think there's 3 points of entry when I speak about to the police world, which is really I think, reflective of so many organizations. What happens to those that we are training, what happens to those serving, and then what happens to those that are retired? How do you create that sense of belonging? And I'll tell you, women in policing do this really, really well. And, we've had the opportunity even tonight, to speak to our Brenda, who just is so insightful in this space. But I just watch about the importance of belonging to people who were there when you have stories that nobody else knows, right? And I think that there is something so critical to sort of that knowledge of belonging to something, either a family system, a time, we both survived this event. There's such a connection. One of the greatest predictors of grief is finding a grief group where you can identify, not because you went through the exact same thing, because every experience with loss is different, but often one of the greatest predictors is, when we can get together and talk about what it's like, Abby, to lose somebody to a suicide, to bury your own baby. Some of these these groups are clubs, if you will, that we don't want to belong to. And it can be the most isolating and lonely and right. And when we've been divorced and we had a group of friends, who goes where, what happens in this space. It is just finding a place to belong, even in that isolation, I think, is the greatest predictor of navigating through it the best. And sometimes it's even creating or finding or seeking those places. I've spent a lot of time doing individual work with moms who've lost their children, and police officers who've served for many years and are so disheartened with the entity of the police world. And it's about finding the people within it that keep you connected, not the organization itself. Okay, that becomes like super critically important. But okay, aside. Now, when our sense of belonging is threatened, even momentarily, we become more likely to feel worse about ourselves, perform below our potential, behave impulsively, see others as hostile, and lash out defensively when provoked. Okay, that's Cohen's work, which I have the resource in here. So many forces fuel division and undermine belonging. So the list is probably the longest: racism, sexism, any other bias you can name, right? Political ideals. The social media as a cult is a culprit of, I think, it's the topic of discussion for the ages about how it creates toxic connections of belonging. If you're coming together around something that is divisive in nature, it can be the thing that brings you together, but be very careful that there's more to your relationship than just fighting the man, the patriarchy, the misogyny, the anti-vaxxers, the Trump supporters, whatever those things. Okay. And I think in any of these places, like, I love these things, Kate and Liz, like divorce, getting laid off, the trauma bond can pull you in, right? We all got to PTSD, whatever that is, right? And it's okay. And again, as I just said, we've all come together because we've lost a child. We've all come together because we're divorced. We're all come together. It is important that I think to develop the depth of those relationships. Is there something here more than the trauma bond, than the thing that sort of brought us together? And I think that sense of belonging serves as well, but also, how does it feel in your body? Do you become then the therapist for the other person? Is that all you talk about? Are you perpetuating that belief, which is really the scary thing for me sometimes, when those groups are not facilitated in any way, or there's some sense of like, now what do we do with it? Despite the fact we've all had a similar experience, what do we do with it inside of it? Okay, so that's also, I think, really critical when we start to think about, where our friendships land. I'm going to show you a video, and then we're going to talk about it real quick, because I think this is like so lovely, and it just really depicts for me, it's housed in addiction. Okay. And because the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. Johann Hari has talked many, many times about this, but the first guy that ever spoke about it, they've created sort of a video depiction of this. So I'm going to show it to you and then we're going to unpack it. Okay. Take a look at this.
What causes, say, heroin addiction? This is a really stupid question, right? It's obvious. We all know it. Heroin causes heroin addiction. Here's how it works. If you use heroin for 20 days, by day 21, your body would physically crave the drug ferociously because there are chemical hooks in the drug. That's what addiction means. But there's a catch. Almost everything we think we know about addiction is wrong. If you, for example, break your hip, you'll be taken to a hospital and you'll be given loads of diamorphine for weeks or even months. Diamorphine is heroin. It's in fact much stronger heroin than any addict can get on the street because it's not contaminated by all the stuff drug dealers dilute it with. There are people near you being given loads of deluxe heroin in hospitals right now. So at least some of them should become addicts. But this has been closely studied. It doesn't happen. Your grandmother wasn't turned into a junkie by her hip replacement. Why is that? Our current theory of addiction comes in part from a series of experiments that were carried out earlier in the 20th century. The experiment is simple. You take a rat and put it in a cage with 2 water bottles. One is just water, the other is water laced with heroin or cocaine. Almost every time you run this experiment, the rat will become obsessed with the drugged water and keep coming back for more and more until it kills itself. But in the 1970s, Bruce Alexander, a professor of psychology, noticed something odd about this experiment. The rat is put in the cage all alone. It has nothing to do but take the drugs. What would happen, he wondered, if we tried this differently? So he built Rat Park, which is basically heaven for rats. It's a lush cage where the rats would have colored balls, tunnels to scamper down, plenty of friends to play with, and they could have loads of sex. Everything a rat about town could want. And they would have the drugged water and the normal water bottles. But here's the fascinating thing. In Rat Park, rats hardly ever use the drugged water. None of them ever use it compulsively. None of them ever overdose. But maybe this is a quirk of rats, right? Well, helpfully, there was a human experiment along the same lines. The Vietnam War. 20% of American troops in Vietnam were using a lot of heroin. People back home were really panicked because they thought there would be hundreds of thousands of junkies on the streets of the United States when the war was over. But a study followed the soldiers home and found something striking. They didn't go to rehab. They didn't even go into withdrawal. 95% of them just stopped after they got home. If you believe the old theory of addiction, that makes no sense. But if you believe Professor Alexander's theory, it makes perfect sense. Because if you're put into a horrific jungle in a foreign country where you don't want to be, and you could be forced to kill or die at any moment, doing heroin is a great way to spend your time. But if you go back to your nice home with your friends and your family, it's the equivalent of being taken out of that first cage and put into a human rat park. It's not the chemicals, it's your cage. We need to think about addiction differently. Human beings have an innate need to bond and connect. When we are happy and healthy, we will bond with the people around us. But when we can't, because we're traumatized, isolated, or beaten down by life, we will bond with something that gives us some sense of relief. It might be endlessly checking a smartphone, it might be pornography, video games, Reddit, gambling, or it might be cocaine. But we will bond with something because that is our human nature. The path out of unhealthy bonds is to form healthy bonds. To be connected to people you want to be present with. Addiction is just one symptom of the crisis of disconnection that's happening all around us. We all feel it. Since the 1950s, the average number of close friends an American has been steadily declining. At the same time, the amount of floor space in their homes has been steadily increasing. To choose floor space over friends. To choose stuff over connection. The war on drugs we've been fighting for almost a century now has made everything worse. Instead of helping people heal and getting their life together, we have cast them out from society. We have made it harder for them to get jobs and become stable. We take benefits and support away from them if we catch them with drugs. We throw them in prison cells, which are literally cages. We put people who are not well in a situation that makes them feel worse and hate them for not recovering. For too long, we've talked only about individual recovery from addiction. But we need now to talk about social recovery, because something has gone wrong with us as a group. We have to build a society that looks a lot more like Rat Park and a lot less like those isolated cages. We are going to have to change the unnatural way we live and rediscover each other. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection.
Stop it. Good? Cool? Back up? All right. So what I love the most about that is, again, I could dive into the world of addiction, but this talk is really about the importance of the Rat Park conversation. So when you think about the isolation that comes from the ease of not attending events, of not going out, of not having to, because we have spent so much time getting inundated by data all day. Okay. If we're sitting at a desk, we got ding, 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 email notifications. Our watch, I had to take off my Apple Watch because there's too much happening here. I couldn't stay connected when I was on stage. When I was doing therapy. I'm not good enough to not stay connected to the people here, because what if it's the kids? What if it's something else? What if it's? And I'm missing the thing that's right in front of me. And I think it's so interesting, my daughter in particular, my boys are like this too, but, we'll be like, I'll talk to you when you're off your phone. Mom, get off your phone. Mom, get off your phone. I'm like, I use this for work. I'm communicating with the people. And quite frankly, I love the people in the interweb better than I love my children, generally speaking. You know what I mean? And so it is alluring to be in that space. And when we think about the shittier we feel about ourselves, or if I start to think like, oh my God, I'm screwing my kids up anyway, and we're in this space. And so what we're losing, I think, is just sort of like, I love Alexander's work around the idea that, like, when we have the opportunity to just take the drug or the non-drugged water, the shittier and more isolated we feel, we will treat our bodies worse. We will engage more in that world. When we start to re-engage on purpose, because nobody's going to do that for us these days. I think this is the conversation we need to start having, because it is so sexy to spend a lot of your time on TikTok, or this is how I define it. If you're old, you're spending a lot of time on Facebook. If you're medium, you're spending a lot of time on Instagram. If you're hipper, you're spending a lot of time on a TikTok. Regardless, we are engaging with usually invisible, anonymous people that do not respond, our bodies do not respond to. I cannot change the neurochemistry. And to the same degree that I can when I go for coffee with somebody versus sending them a text message or watching their stories on Instagram. The only person who has control over that is you and me. And it's going to be hard, because I know I should charge my phone outside my room. I know I've got an Apple Watch. I should be wearing it. No, I'm better when I'm not. Doesn't mean you have to do it all the time, but consciously making those choices, I think, are going to be the biggest deals of this generation. Okay. So in your notes, I say, here's some key considerations for creating friendships that matter. Okay. So we'll go through them real quick. Your time is precious. You get to choose how to spend it. And I want you to pay close attention, and this is me talking to me right now, to how your body feels in the presence of the friends in your life. Stay closer to the ones who feel like sunshine. I mean, feels like it's a fucking post on somebody's story, but also be the sunshine. Everybody needs a little these days. And when I think I was watching this thing from Reese Witherspoon said the other day. She was on a podcast with Abby Wambach, who I adore, and Glennon, who I adore less than Abby, but I still adore them both. Three kinds of people in this world, right? She was like, you can develop them or split them really quickly into, how did she describe it? The ones who will lift you up, support you no matter what. Okay, they got you. They will show up. There's no like, oh, must be nice. That like biggest fan. Okay, I can think about the ones who have unrelentlessly pursued, been in my corner. Right, the jealousy was non-existent. The time, the effort. If I think about the people in my life who I've done that for, top up here, third. Okay, neutral. The ones in the middle. Don't care. Doesn't matter. No harm, no foul. Nobody misses at anything. We're, on the same lacrosse team. We're, hey, good to see you. You're great. I'm great. Everybody's fine. Okay. Okay. And then the other third are the ones that deplete you, bring you down, are for whatever reason, misunderstanding of your character, your intention, your souls don't align, whatever that looks like, right? Find your bottom third. At the very at and now, easier said than done, I got it. But those top 2/3 leaves you with a pretty significant amount of people. And I got to tell you, I mean, I'm having a lot of conversation with my daughter about this because I'm watching even, our children at 11 and 14 years old trying to make decisions about like, I need to be near a shinier object, or these ones look like they're having more fun, or is this one cooler? Or is that one? Where do you feel best? Matters, not whether you feel like you're on the fringe or not sort of being included, but what does that look like? Okay. So yes, I can tell you this. When I feel like and I've said this before to her and about her, but when I have been sad or scared, or when I went through some of the hardest things in my life, I just need a hug from Tanis, the friend that I've had since the beginning of time. She has this, like, this is going to sound weird, but I'm going to say it anyway. The most amazing curly hair that anybody has ever had on the planet. And it has a smell to me. When I get to hug her and do like this for her, I know it's going to be okay. She's never been the most verbose friend that I would have. She never has said things that have made me go like, okay, got it. It is her physical presence that changes everything to me. We're going to be okay. I know that she'd skate through walls for me, show up with, usually a cooler of root vegetables when I'm really struggling because she grows a lot of shit in her garden because she's very domestic. But that matters more. You will never need to say the things that are going to fix it because you can't in the worst stages of your days. It is the physical presence of other human beings. And I think anyway, that's the critical piece for me. Reflect on what it is that bonds you as friends and play cautiously around those that are connected only through divisiveness. For example, we hate the same things. We love the same things. Very different from having similar interests. Okay. One of my favorite new learnings in this space is, you don't build trust by offering it. You build trust by asking for it in your time of need. And I think we really need to unpack the burden discussion. I don't want to ask because I'm a burden. I don't want to, they're busy. I think some of my moments that have mattered the most to me, is when, even the lifelong friends that I've had, have called to say I'm scared, or, I need this right now. Right. Which is often the reason why we don't ask the friends we love or are in the development stage of friendship with the most. Consider the friends who you would say, it's an honor to be there for you. It crushes my soul that you went through this alone, right? And it doesn't mean that you're going to do that for everybody, but it's like sort of thinking about who in your world you would never want them to go through their hardest chapters alone. Women, or those who identify as women, and namely those who have an emotional language, are better at the friendship game, historically speaking, the deep friendship game, not the surface friendship game. However, showing our sons and our male partners how to do it is imperative. Hugs, saying I love you, even when it gets uncomfortable. And I mean, again, respecting personal space, all of those things, people always have a story about that. But normalizing even, with our sons, with those who identify as males, as truly saying, Simon Sinek's got this whole piece right now around saying, when you leave somebody who you really care about, not like saying, I love you, if that's truly how you feel about somebody, right? And oftentimes we'll be like, love ya, yep. Thanks, bud. Love you, bud. You're good, bud. Whatever. This idea of genuinely saying to the people you care about, I love you, if that is true, significantly changes the way that you operate. And can you imagine, if our male partners, if the people who, and I know how much Aaron deeply cares for and loves the top 4 friends in his world. And I think the only time I've ever heard him say things like that are when we're at a funeral or somebody is about to lose a parent or, something like that has happened, right? The I love you thing, and meaning it, even if it's not the words, but being very specific about the way that we connect to people is, I can't even tell you, the most important thing on the planet right now. Okay. Pay close attention to your need for friends. That is your need for social connections. It varies for so many of us. Reflect on whether you pull away from social situations because you don't feel like you belong or because you're protecting yourself. When you've chosen the right humans, it tends to feel like you'll make it a priority. When you have the right people in your world, there is the things, it doesn't feel like a job. Okay. So I'll tell you, here are the signs to look out for when it might be time to cut them loose or spend more time with them. Whatever, the opposite could be true. Okay. Ready. You dread the engagement in your calendar. Courage over comfort. I often think about Brene Brown's words in this space. When I feel like I'm going to resent this, sometimes there's obligatory things that we have to do, right? Whether there's family system functions or, all of those things. Like, I'm not saying, that, anyway, I'm not going to undo what I'm going to say. If you dread the engagement in your calendar, if it's become more of an effort, maybe even a chore than a positive activity, this might be because you feel you can't be yourself around them anymore. This dread is the first sign you might be forcing something in a direction that it doesn't need to go. Okay. And I think that, okay, I'm going to get to that. So number 2, they say they're busy all the time. Just like intimate relationships, friendships require reciprocity. If you feel undervalued, you will probably experience resentment. You may experience resentment towards that person. And I think that what is critical in this space is really being clear about the fact that our life may take in different directions. We spoke about this tonight, when you're in your, 50s, your 60s, and everybody seems to be busy with their grandchildren, and at this moment all your grandchildren are growing. You really reflecting on the friendships we've had for a long time, maybe in different stages. I remember I was traveling the world. I remember calling Tanis from the foot of the Eiffel Tower, and she was breastfeeding her first baby. We had remarkably different lives for at least 2 decades, and the physical presence of stepping back into her space still felt like no other bond that I had developed, right? That was true of Ria. We could be apart for many, many days, and she felt like coming home. And I think that when you're redeveloping friendships in this season, it's like oftentimes where we're going to start is in the places, the things that we like now, the things that we sort of engage with now. You notice yourself craving new friendships, I think is another sort of sign that we might need to expand in this world. I'll tell you this, as I've become an entrepreneur, a business owner, as somebody who has put the priority in becoming something that I've dreamed about for many, many years. Sitting at the same table as people who want to have those discussions has become very important to me. And that's where I feel alive. That's where I feel excited about things. That's where I want to contribute, or what about? Pay close attention to then creating more opportunities in that space. If it is you love knitting, seeking the people who engage in that way. This is where the development of online friendships really offer those things, because you have more access to people now than we would have 2 decades ago. How you engage after that initial connection really matters on, the benefits of those relationships as well. But pay close attention to that. The other thing that I think is really critical, where I see people get caught up so much, is that a shared past is all you have in common anymore. They were my bridesmaid. They, we went through this horrific situation together. We were colleagues, at one point. I often think about this, we graduated high school together. I don't know. If this is the case for you, it also means that when you're with these friends, your identity is stagnant and stuck, you may have outgrown that. So it can be good to have old friends you've known forever. But if the friendships cannot change and evolve with you, then it probably won't give you what you need. And it doesn't mean that there is a necessary like, we're out. It is, I think, a bit of a reflection in your own space about how much does this add to my feeling of competency, of the desire to connect, to catch up, to get my soul filled at the same time. Okay. Yeah. Right, Abby? The shared past trap. Okay. So you can't help but complain about them all the time. This is the last one I'm going to say because I think I just really, really love this. We were exposed to our partners and friends so closely and so frequently that it's only natural to complain about them. So let's be clear that this does happen. But if you only dwell on the negatives, you might want to take a moment to reassess how much you like this person. If you're always like, oh, me, this is happening every time we're together. If you're doing a lot of yipping behind the groups of friends that you're in, holy fuck, get out. What are you doing if the only thing that is connecting you is bullshittery about everybody else? That's got to feel like the unsafest place on the planet. Now, my mom was one of my greatest teachers in this place, right? I always remember how much I felt she maintained integrity in many of her friendships. And I was like, she would always say to me, don't you ever, ever, ever talk about other people. Now, have I done this in my life? Fuck yes. And I think I always try to get back to that thing. If what is bringing me together with another person is how much we can talk about another, there's got to be some reflection there, I think, right? So you don't have to be friends with someone you don't like, value, or respect. Think about those who bring the best out in you, then those who bring out the worst, and make sure the toxic ones are the ones who go first. I think this is a tricky line because it doesn't mean you're always going to agree. It doesn't mean you're always going to support, condone the same things. I don't think that's healthy either, right? But I think it's like so critical about reflecting on who and how you can have those conversations with, when, who matches your level of emotional health, who is bonded together with something that often involves hating another or hating a group or talking about other people. Man, if that's the vast majority of the connection, I'd question significantly. All right. Biggest takeaways for me. I'm going to give you these and then we'll just jump in if we have any questions. Fantastic. If we don't, that's okay too. Fostering friendships, the biggest takeaways. I put this in your link of resources. The greatest motivator for me to foster my friendships is that we must teach our children how to be friends. The hard, slow, old-fashioned way. There is no expedited process for developing long-term, deep connections with people. Everybody goes through the beginning phases where it feels great. The work in developing long-term friendships is how do we start to figure out our dance? Be okay with the fact that the relationships that matter the most will have conflict. Conflict is a part of any relationship. It doesn't matter how much you have. It's more about how you handle it when it comes. Okay? That is the predictor of long-lasting relationships. And I think that I watch so much with our kids the need to sort of unpack what's happening with our friends. My kids will ask me, how come you don't spend any more time with this person anymore? Or what happened here? Do you still like this person? Why did you used to do lots of things with this person. Why don't you do this? Having those conversations with our kids become really important, as much as facilitating when they have breakdowns in their friendships. Not like helicoptering the shit out of things, but also understanding that sometimes helping in the repair matters because there's less in the scripts on how we do it because we don't spend that much time showing our kids how to do it. Modeling this means they will have the capacity to figure this out themselves. Okay? 2, create a trusted group of advisors and mentors in this space. Who's good at this? who have you read about? Who is writing books about this stuff? Who understands who are the sages in your life? Your aunts, your grandmothers, your best friends, your school, your whoever in this space that you can kind of lean into, lean on, wonder how it happens. You know, Marty and I have been very public about our relationship sometimes, and I mean, I threw her into this. Now that I reflect on it, I probably should have consulted a little more about this. But I really love the opportunity to build our work together, and she is the epitome of everything that we have. We couldn't be more different in so many ways, but being able to navigate business, friendship, relationship, all of those kind of things has been the greatest honor of my career, but also I think one of the most difficult things to navigate. And I think having those conversations has been so critical to me, and watching that unfold. And oftentimes people say to us in this business space, do you know how rare it is? And we also have, I think, had recent conversations about, like, we're both aware that this may not last forever. And I hope it does. I'll Did you hear her? What? It is lasting forever. I told her that if she ever leaves me, I'll kill her. So I feel like that's probably not how you should end a talk on adult friendship. You know, like murder is probably not what you should do with people. But I think what's really critical, right, is that, you know, I have learned the hard way that friendships may not last forever. And I think what you just need to be very clear about is what do you need in your world in this moment? What do the people around you bring to you? What do you bring to them? I think that's what's really critical. Now, apps are not out of the question. And I put a couple of things in here that I think are really interesting, which I didn't even know existed, to be honest with you. Havena, Bumble for Friends, Meetup. Like, if you're in a new city, a new town, you can actually create, like, just like there's dating apps, there's friendship apps. Could we connect on a certain thing? I really love these things. Because I think we need to get a little bit more creative in how we find our people in our communities, particularly when you move to a new town, or you move to a new city. Again, the same thing. You can, these opportunities that social media affords us, as disconnecting as it is sometimes, that can be important. You will outgrow some friendships, full stop. That's expected, and it's 100% okay. It means you're growing. All right. So in the resources, I also said books to consider. That's that Outlive that I told you about, Adia, and then Belonging, the Science of Creating Connection. That's Cohen's work, which I just find fascinating. And then I also brought in the link for the Feeling Seen course, in case that's something that you might want to get better at, in terms of how we allow others in our world to feel seen just because of our physical presence, which I think is the greatest healing power of the world. And we all have it in us. And your group of friends, your group of acquaintances need you now more than ever, I promise you. And the more you give, quite often, the more you get. Okay, so that's that. Is there any questions, Mar?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. How do we differentiate? Can you say that one more time? Okay. Okay, how do we differentiate between pouring it all in and learning when to cut loose? Such a good question. I want you to feel it. Okay? Because I think that it is so critically important that there are some people, because they are related to us, because we share something, that they may never be that friend may never be the one that's going to reciprocate some things. And there's lots of people in our life, my life, that I would consider, I know I will be the one that will be there for them. I think what I want you to consider is the idea around what the cost it is for you. And if you can be really clear on what it feels like to sort of give and not receive in a certain number of relationships in your life, and that be your calling to serve in that regard, okay. If it's costing you too much, then it's time to pull away. I think that's the thing. The courage piece over resentment is the feeling that is often the critical piece for me. And again, that's all Brené Brown's work around the feeling, right? When I start to resent the fact that it's always me that's calling, it's always me that's creating these things, I do everything and anything for you. Okay. We can have conversations about, gosh, I'd love more from you. And if that's not reciprocated, then it's okay to put your very precious time and resources other places so that you can fill up in some capacity to either sort of maintain that relationship in some points or not. Okay. And to that end, Heather just had this question, Marty, that I think is amazing. How do we break up? I was reading some of this, and I think, we're doing a podcast with one of the greatest dating experts of all times, and she was really curious. Logan Uri is her name, and she wrote How Not to Die Alone. And she said sometimes it's easier to break up in intimate relationships because there tends to be a beginning and an end. There is this idea that if I no longer want to date you, I kind of have to let you know, or I'm going to ghost you, but still then somebody's really quite clear that we're not making out frequently anymore. It is sometimes harder, and I think we need to normalize this, to break up with friends. And there's, I think, a couple of really big questions that you have to be clear about this. A, is it necessary, right? A, is it necessary? Is there the requirement to have the formal conversation where you're like, you know what? No. So sometimes I don't even think it's necessary. I think it's about just sort of the slow fading out. Other times, when there's been a boundary violation, when there is a direct conversation that's needed about this is no longer serving me for these reasons or you, I think it's best done face to face. If it's not safe to do that, sending an email is probably your next best thing, certainly over text. But I think it's like being clear is kind. And I think that being clear about sort of where you're at, not what they're doing, is how you open it. Here's where I'm at. Here's how this is affecting me. And here's what I need moving forward. So for this moment, forever, this is no longer a place where I feel safe in our relationship or where I feel like this relationship is going to be good for me. I wish you so much growth and wellness and all the things. But this is not the place where I think we need to continue. So I think it's tricky. And I just want to normalize that because I think, again, intimate relationships are so much easier to break up with because there isn't a script around friendship. And sometimes I don't think there needs to be. Okay.
Ready for another one?
Yeah.
If you haven't found your tribe, how do you not lose faith to keep going?
Okay. If you haven't found your tribe. So number one, I would just say as an aside, the word tribe is often really sacred to Indigenous peoples. And I know that, we use it colloquially all the time. And I get your intention, right? The meaning is, how do we find, if we haven't found where we fit yet, how do you not lose the faith that people are there? I think the thing that I would say more than anything is that I know the data to be true. We are lonely. And I would consider really digging into the things that you love the most. Where do you shine? What do you have to offer this world, right? Are you do you love to spend time with elderly people? Do you love to spend time with kids? Do you love to knit, grow dahlias? It's a flower. I just learned about it. Do you, whatever that is, right? Seeking the people that love those things too is sort of the quickest way. When I watch my son, who struggles significantly with friendships, in his younger years, find his people, they loved Dungeons and Dragons. Interesting. He could talk for it. His greatest conversations that I've watched him have is around people who have read the books that he's read. And so an online book club, a place where people enjoy the things you enjoy, taking a class. I think those are sometimes the places where we find community. And I think that it is sort of doing a whole lot more self-reflection than it is, why isn't this world giving to me? I think you have so much to offer in this lonely world that is so needed. You are so needed. And I think that's just the focus of, do not ever underestimate your power to be connected in communities. Start small. Give out compliments. Spend time in very limited, whatever you got, the volunteering places. all of those things, I think, is really, this matters way more, knowing your worth right here, that so many people sort of need you. And I would just, the relentless give up, or the relentless pursuit, and not giving up on sort of finding those spaces, taking those breaths when you need it to sort of go back in, become really critical.
Ready?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a connection between being an only child and having a stronger need for close, safe relationships?
Ooh, is there a connection between being an only child? There's lots of data around birth order and the ability to develop friendships. There's also a lot of data around only children. And it's mixed, actually, from what I remember, because I haven't done a deep dive on this lately, but I know that sometimes there is this sense of like, it becomes difficult to develop skills around sharing because you've never really had to, unless you've been exposed to multiple cousins and all those things. Okay. I think that I think it can be very limiting to just sort of define ourselves as like, because I was only child, I fucked up at this, because I, have been this way my whole life. I think I would much more reflect on your experiences with your story of human interaction, rather than, where we have landed, either as an only child or in the birth order, or whether we were adopted or not, or whatever those things are. But why there's importance in that is often because as the only child, you were responsible for many things. Oftentimes, creating adult relationships and friendships. Your best friends tended to be the bigger people in your life. And so you maybe were more mature than other people. Also not a lot of social reciprocity that needed to happen in the early developmental stages. Not always true. So this is generalization. When I think about, there tends to be like the middle kid is super gregarious and has all the things where the baby gets babied and is more whiny. Like, all of those things are not necessarily true. The oldest who is raised as the oldest is generally the best. Until you find out you have a sister and that she's actually the oldest, then you're completely fucked and you need to be in therapy for the rest of your life. Okay, right. Sorry, Marty's like, get back on track. Okay, sorry, next question. It's not about me, she said.
What if the toxic are family that can't necessarily be avoided?
Ooh. So what if the toxic are family that can't necessarily be avoided? So then what we step into is boundary conversations, okay? And boundaries are for you, not them. Boundaries are not ultimatums. I did a whole night on boundaries that I think is really important that we, maybe can revisit. Boundaries, when you can't separate from people, because, for example, they're your ex-partner and you're raising children together. It is really about here, the self-regulation here, the reflection that comes from understanding and empathically getting a sense of where they might be coming from, not condoning, supporting their behavior, their racist remarks, their whatever the things that is getting to you, but really being clear on what's okay and not okay for you. If these lines get crossed, then we step away from this family function. And they can do those are their choices, but here's how we're going to respond, and here's what we need to know in that way. There's so much goodness about you and that I want to stay connected to, and whatever, but these are the limits that I won't have. So I think that really becomes clear on what you'll tolerate and what you won't, and sometimes that's communicated clearly if the relationship is strong enough to navigate that, and other times it's just an internal sense of knowing that, we spend shorter times at, family gatherings, or that we will engage in ways that we know I have to be rested and clear. And in our own internal family system, we have the conversations about what we believe is maybe sometimes different than what you'll hear around the Thanksgiving dinner table. And we can unpack that as a family after. And here's what we, how we respond in situations like that. And I think all of those things typically, and you get to decide in your own system what is worth separating a relationship from completely, or being able to sort of navigate and, keep sacred in the sense of what you believe to be true.
How do you overcome trust issues / the fear of not wanting to be wronged in some way by your friends versus just being okay with being lonely to avoid it all?
Jesus, that's a big question. Okay, say it one more time.
How do you overcome trust issues and the fear of not wanting to be wronged versus being lonely?
Okay. So I really love that. And I think it's a risk reward. And the fact that you can even articulate that question is a huge thing, that you are just acknowledging the fact that this is an issue, right? I know based on my story or the story that I see in other people that trust is an issue for me, right? Because it's been, this is the experience in my bones or what I've seen other people do it. You can't address what you don't acknowledge, and you're acknowledging it here. This is an issue for me. I'm worried about this. So then really reflect on how that's showing up in your ability to be vulnerable with the people in your world, and your ability to give second chances or to dive in deep and be vulnerable. And how is that thwarting the ability to sort of develop? Because again, here's the thing, you only have control over you. Full stop. So being really clear on what's okay and not okay here, and knowing that you'll be super sensitive or heightened or triggered or whatever works, that language that happens in that space because of what is in your bones, being conscious of those things will allow you to be a little bit more brave in this space, because you're much more aware of what's happening inside your body. And you can question those things a little bit more. Like, is this because I'm coming from this place, or is this because this is actually what I'm experiencing in this moment? So just reflecting on those things, I think, gives you a lot of power.
Ready? If you're the planner, organizer, the link to keep the people and group of friends together and no longer wish to have this title, how do you voice this?
I don't want to be the one who pulls everything together all the time. All right, listen, you've been doing it for years. Let's not lie, okay? And oftentimes when we step into that role, it's because we're good at it, and I think that oftentimes we have done this for so many, such a long time, particularly as women. And then we're like, we don't want it anymore because nobody's doing it for us. I think, again, it's a conscious reflection on your own ability to allow others to step into that role, to delegate that role to other people, to really reflect on what the cost is to you if nobody else does that. Does that mean that they don't like you? Does that mean that they don't want to? Does that mean that the only reason they're in your life is because you're good at it? It might be because you're good at it. And I think sometimes it's like really, really reflecting on, most of us want somebody else to care for us, to show up for us, to show us that we matter. And I think it's like, if you can have those conversations with the one or two people that really matter the most in those groups that you continue to organize, and wonder about whether, do you think you could do this for me? Do you think you can take the wheel here? Here's why. I'm feeling exhausted. I'm feeling like I can't. I think it's really just sort of that reflection on how you ended up in that position and what you want moving forward. Is it because you want to know that you matter in this situation? And is that maybe already true?
Okay, I just have two more.
Two more.
Do you think it's realistic to change the dynamics of a friendship from one of 30 plus years of being like family to one of being surface level due to a divorce of a couple friend?
Try me again.
Do you think it's realistic to change the dynamics of a friendship?
Okay.
From one of 30 plus years of being like family to one of just being surface level due to a divorce of our couple friends.
Oh God, that's so hard. And I think it's really specific to the situation. I think it's so hard to say this. I think that relationships, friendships evolve, period. Okay. I am not the same friend that I was to Tanis, to Leah when we were in college. I am not the same friend. I'm not the same partner that I was to Aaron at the beginning of our relationship. Marty, if I look back at our relationship over the 10 years that we've been together, our relationship has evolved. So do I think if something massive happened in any of those dynamics, including a divorce, a death, an illness, when somebody didn't show up the way you thought they should, when you got cancer, when how come this person didn't show up here? I think there is a constant evolution of the relationships in our lives. And I think that it is possible entirely to develop deeper friendships after major things have happened. And I also think it also lets you know where you should be investing your time. And if it's no longer possible for the other side of that relationship to dig in because they feel like they're being disrespectful to, your ex-partner, or whether, they can't maintain their relationship, then it's sad, but it's a grieving of that relationship or that season that's over.
Right.
That would be my thought, generally speaking, not knowing the situation.
How would you approach negotiating what your relationship looks like when most of the people you consider your closest friends are now having children and getting married and you are in a different situation? Like many others here tonight, I am often the glue that holds the group together, but it's exhausting.
Oh, I love that question because I feel like I was really a glue at some point in our relationships or my life too. And I think that, when our friendships change and, people start to have kids and, all of those things, we can play such significant roles. I mean, I think some of the greatest friendships I had were in grad school when everybody was coupled. There was such a joke because at all the Halloween parties for like 3 years, people were asking, they named my pseudo partner Casper, the ghost. And even one of my couple friends, Mark and Sybil, dressed up as Jody and Casper for Halloween one time. Because in that season, the thing that mattered the most to me was finishing my education, getting my master's, getting my PhD, whatever. And I desperately wanted to be in a relationship, but I had everything I needed in this group of 6 couple friends. We did all the things together. And I wanted to be like, all those things. But I became the best aunt. I learned the most about, engaging in their kids' lives, all those things. But it also then fostered the need for me to figure out how to develop friendships outside of that. And so who were the single friends? I joined a hockey team. I still stayed connected to those people who had kids. I just spent a little less. I also had this group that I really love too. So I think there can be evolutions in those times. And again, when I said, Tanis was breastfeeding when I was like at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, we still talk about this all the time. Because when I had my twins, her kids were all in middle school or high school. And so I'm breastfeeding babies feeling like the biggest trapped woman on the planet. And she came in with her cooler of vegetables that she'd grown in her garden and took the babies for days, And I think you don't have to be in the same place exactly to develop the deepest friendships, because we often need the best advice you can ever get as a parent is from somebody who doesn't have kids sometimes, And so it's like, I think you don't have to be in the same life story to develop those friendships deeply. I think you have so much to contribute, as do they, as you navigate the next seasons of your life. But you can also then branch out for periods of time, and if they matter the most, you'll come back to them.
You got a last minute one.
Yeah.
What about those friends/family who don't acknowledge your birthday?
Out. Done. Over. You don't acknowledge my birthday? Dead. To me. Forever. Just joking. I don't know. Maybe they're tired. I mean, I just sent a message to Stacy, who I adore and has been in our group, or worked on our team for years. And I was like, fuck me. It was her birthday yesterday. I sent her a message today. Happy belated birthday. I love you very much. When's the next time we can get together?
Buddy, it doesn't matter when, is it?
Marty just said a really important thing.
Said it doesn't matter when, it's if you do it.
Yeah. And if sometimes people forget your birthday, you call them. Like, this is what Shayna said to me today. Shayna's new on our team. We adore her like crazy. And she's like, hey, in case I sound older today, it's because it's my birthday. Now we know. Marty's like, put that in the calendar. Huh? So I think sometimes it's like that becomes really critical, right? Like, I think we kind of also have to know that right now we've never been so noisy in our lives. And sometimes we consider people forgetting about us as, we're not their priority anymore. There's got to be so much grace in this season, because again, we have never had so much busyness in our head. I promise you. Okay, listen, friends, I want to be very respectful of your time. It is now the witching hour, and we've got our beautiful 90 minutes together, which always fills my soul. So thank you for being here. Marty, thank you for being so great in the background. Des, thank you too. It is always such a joy. This community, I heard somebody write or watch somebody write in here about like sometimes you think you know people on the internet. I feel like that. I think you can create really meaningful connections in social spaces. And some of the most remarkable people here tonight, Luann McQuaid, Brenda Glass, Patty, all of these people, who we get to meet in person sometimes is really, it started in this safe place we're trying to create. So do not underestimate your power to stay connected to people, to let them know they matter, um, and to really know where you feel your best with and who, and spend the most time there. Because if you're better, the people you love, you lead, you laugh with will be better too. Good night, everybody. Hopefully, I'll see you next month, which is we're going to talk about trauma. So tickets are available for that too. So come back if you want to gather again at this virtual space next month. But in the meantime, take care of each other. And thank you for being here. It means the world to all of us.